Bryan, welcome, buddy. Appreciate you doing this.
Chris, great to be here. Really stoked to dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to get started because I know there's a ton of great info that you're going to provide. And what I will say is I'm excited to have somebody like you who has, that specific event marketing experience over the last 4 years to really driving a series of stuff. Right now, for those folks who are just joining, I think we're going to do 12 over the next 3 months.
Next 3 months. We're live every Thursday at noon. So if you're here now, you can join next week.
Yeah. I will say one of the things that I'm most excited about is obviously we as a company are trying to figure out the ideal way to grow into our own event marketing strategy, whether that's webinars, whether it's events, whether it's obviously the success we have meeting other folks in person, but then leveraging that experience, that content, that research, the conversations into, things throughout the year that help drive our own business. So to me, I'm almost like a moderator, but I'm an attendee in this way. So let's dive in. Where I would love for you to give a little background on yourself so people have context to what you drove over the last 4 years at Virtuous.
Yeah, sounds good. I think before I even kick it off, I just want to say for those that have joined and those continuing to come into the room, please get active in the chat. We'd love to take your questions and, feed your insights. Like, we want to make this as dynamic and as much of a conversation with you as well as we navigate the next 45 minutes. So just want to say thank you for giving your time, being here today. Ask us questions. We are happy to pivot and dive into where you're most interested as well.
Well, don't ask me questions. Ask you questions because you're the expert, buddy.
So for the last 4 years, prior to joining the Sessionboard team, I had the privilege of leading the marketing team at Virtuous, which is a CRM company, B2B SaaS company. And when I joined, we were small and mighty. We were a team of 25 people. We were floating around 2.5 million in ARR. And over the course of the 4 years that I spent there, we experienced over 700% growth. So watched that company grow from 25 people to 200 people, and watched our customer base grow to the point where we were nearly at about 30 million ARR. So we had substantial growth over the course of 4 years, and events were a pivotal cornerstone of our go-to-market strategy. And events played that role through every stage of growth. Our event strategy shifted and changed over that time. And looking back, I'm just excited to dive into like what we learned, what the roadblocks were, what our specific approach was. So hopefully, no matter what stage you're at today, you can take some of those learnings as applicable to your own business. But I believe as an event marketer that events are core to building our business. It helps us develop deeper, richer relationships with customers, partners, prospects. It helps us learn in real time. It helps us get really close to the pain of our customers. And it's a way for us to really exclaim our unique point of view in market. So I think there is so much that events can do for our business. And the key is, how do events really holistically build into the broader go-to-market strategy so that you're ensuring that events aren't just something you do, but it's something that's actually driving meaningful revenue in business.
Cool.
So that's a quick little background on where I've been, the sandbox I've been playing in the last 4 years.
So take us back 4 years, or when you were just getting started as a team of probably an event marketing team, if I remember, because we've known each other for a long time. It was like one or two people or something like that at that point.
Yeah. When I joined the team, it was me and one other marketing person. So it was just a team of 2 marketers. Our team, even just for a little bit of insight, like over the growth trajectory, our team grew to about 15 marketers, but only one of which was a dedicated director of event marketing. So we actually had only, at one point in our growth, we invested more heavily in events by hiring a director of events that oversaw everything that we did. But, when it really comes down to it, I think we ran pretty lean, and it was about everybody getting their hands dirty. So When we first started, I think what was most meaningful is, number one, we cared most about, and part of our ethos was we provide value, not marketing. So a big core of our ethos was we don't care. We just, it doesn't matter if there's 20 people there or 200 people there. We need to be getting in front of our ICP every week, no matter what. And so when we just started small, we started really practically, and that was with our webinar program. So
I think that's actually real quick. I think that's pretty interesting because, since we serve, I'm putting our, the session board shoes on. We serve, the for-profit show organizers, associations, and corporates. And, as you were talking about serving your ICP, I think the through line still applies no matter who you are. If I'm somebody in an association side, I think it really applies. If I'm in the corporate side, it applies. Anyway, I wanted to call that out because I think there's a lot of cross market learning that can be done here. Even though you're coming from the corporate side of things in some ways, I think a lot of association marketers, as well as show organizing marketers, should be able to take a ton from it. So keep going.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think kind of starting really focused on ICP first, because I would say I want to tell two stories here. The first story is a very focused ICP-centric webinar program. And so we were small enough at 2 million ARR where it was just me and 5 sales reps. I think at that time we also had 1 customer success manager. So across our team, and we didn't even have a formal partner team at that point. So again, we were pretty small, pretty lean. We just said, like, marketing has to walk in lockstep with the sales team and with our customer success team. And so the first thing that we built was we did a weekly webinar, but every single week we were first and foremost, we were focused on one very specific, very nuanced segment of our ICP. And we used verticals to help guide that. So for example, we stood up a series called the Build Better series, and it was just for healthcare executive professionals. It was very bespoke. It was invite only. We made sure that the speakers were really, really high profile. We ran it once a month. Now, the other 3 weeks a month, we were running other webinar programs, but they were just focused on other verticals. So what that did for our team was, first and foremost, it allowed us the ability to get really focused on selecting our speakers and activating our speakers. So we would get really clear on having an influencer, having a partner, and having a customer as a part of our roundtable discussion. We did them on Zoom. We didn't even do them on a platform like this, Livestorm. We did them on Zoom so attendees could actually be on camera and participate in the discussion. I would say that it was, for a webinar, it was just very, very personalized, very, very white glove. So I think that's one piece of it, is what it did for our speaker network. But the second piece is it helped our sales team feel like they were in partnership with marketing, which I think is like the key part of the recipe. So when the sales team actually feels ownership over what marketing is putting into market, we saw an incredible compounding effect from registration numbers driving up, an incredible attendee conversion rate. I mean, across our webinars, we would see 52 to 58% conversion rates. And so because the outreach was very personal, it was very specific, and our sales team actually felt like, oh my gosh, if I invite my prospects and those that I'm talking to that are in pipeline to this event and give them value in the process of building this relationship in which we want a bigger partnership with a future customer, it was very valuable for the sales rep to involve them as a key touch point in the sales process. So I think those are like the two really big takeaways for me, was specificity in speaker network and unity with the sales team.
And so what I'm hearing you also say is you started your event strategy. You ended up with actual events, but you started that with a webinar program. Right.
We did, yeah. Over time, and I think we'll get into this in a little while, Chris, is, over time we ended up building a flagship brand event.
Yeah.
Not 100 people showing up to a webinar. We're talking thousands and thousands of registrants with 100+ speakers, like a really,
Yeah.
scoped event that also built and grew over time.
And so so you just kind of spoke from the corporate side, but I would assume if I'm an event marketer on, say, the association side, or say the for-profit show, if I'm on the association side, maybe it's instead of working with sales, I'm working with my sponsor team, my membership team. If I'm on the corporate side, again, really, like you're saying, really dialed in with sales, maybe even CS. I know some of the folks that I talk to a lot really involve CS as well, and even product. But really, really kind of helpful to make the connection. That's cool.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit too, because we also had on the product side, we had our product engineers, but we also had solutions engineers, which in our world, a solutions engineer is actually the person that is running the demo with a sales rep, and actually engaging that team with our webinar and flagship brand events was really, really powerful, because it allowed us to elevate the greatest subject matter experts on our product and put them at the center of our events ecosystem. It's very powerful.
Real quick. You were doing one a week.
One a week. Yeah.
Amongst two people.
Yeah. Yep.
That's impressive.
It was a lot of work. And if the other thing that I'm going to be honest about is a key learning there is, looking back, I would have said that there is a delicate balance between input that goes into creating a weekly event versus, like when you complete an event, like when this event is done today, for example.
Yeah.
At 12:45 Eastern, the event shuts down. We're only actually halfway done with the work we need to do. I would call ending an event and closing an event a lowercase win. The uppercase win is all the things that can come from what we talk about in these 45 minutes. Like, how are we syndicating the content? How are we continuing to build a better relationship with the speaker? How do we want to engage and continue to drive value to everyone in attendance, right? There's so much more that we can do. So I think one of my learnings looking back is we really put our foot on the pedal in terms of volume of events. And I think, at least in the early stages, I think we probably lost on the quality post-event.
Got it. So if you're only 50% of the way through at the end of the actual event, how are you, like, you're still focused on content distribution, syndication, but you then got to focus on the next event. So how were you just juggling constantly between, or did you have a bit of a system for that?
Had a bit of a system. Some of it is just giving yourself enough runtime, right? It's just like, we just need enough breathing room to feel like we are effectively staying ahead of the registration schedule while still being able to effectively syndicate the content. I would basically dedicate Monday through Wednesdays to promotion, and Thursdays and Fridays were just content. So that was the split. That was the split and balance. And to get really specific, content doesn't just mean I threw the transcript into, we didn't have AI back then, which feels kind of weird, but today I would throw the transcript into AI and start crafting an SEO optimized blog post. But the other part of content is literally just, what's the enablement and scripts that you're writing for your sales team? How are you handing off registrant leads to your sales or customer success team? Like, how are you alerting the other teams that have a stake in the process continue to be with you along the way? So I think that's another core systems question around how are you capturing leads? How are you activating the teams that have relationships with those leads?
Okay.
Is another component.
Got it. So now we're a couple months in, we're getting in the groove. How long did you do this before you started to think we want to have our own event, or is that the next area you want to go in this conversation, or where do you want to go now? Because
there's one area that came in between building a flagship brand event and running our webinar strategy. And the more Virtuous is still running a webinar playbook. So, it's going 5+ years strong now. But the one thing that we did was we were driving enough value and getting enough engagement in market where we were actually able to build, and again, this was pretty early, but our early version of highly engaged people that wanted to consume more content through this channel grew to about 7,000 people. And so what we did was we launched an offer where alongside the weekly, very, very specific verticalized webinar, where really like the marketing engine wasn't driving the registrations, it was really the sales team that was driving probably 70% of registrations. We then launched a broader marketing activation that was branded under our category. So we created our own category to set ourselves as the category leader. And we decided that we had enough interest and enough momentum that we could launch a weekly program where we would have a 30-minute conversation once a week with thought leaders in the space that helped us expand on our unique point of view. So now we're a year in, and we're running really nuanced ICP verticalized webinars. And now we've built a broader program that has more of a mass industry appeal that can start to be a magnet to help open up the top of the funnel and bring more people to us.
So you were running 2 webinars a week at that point?
Eventually, yeah.
Okay. So before we even go even further, at what point is leadership convinced enough to say, you know, we need more resources to go to 2? Because I'm sure you're already maxed at 1. Like how, what were the wins, the metrics along the way that gave everyone confidence enough to know that that we're doubling down here?
Yeah, so there's a few key metrics that we tracked. And I would say that like our metrics tracking got much more mature over time. Initially, we were just looking at, okay, like how many net new leads are coming in the door on a monthly basis? How many cold leads are reconverting on the channel on a monthly basis? And then within 90 days of all those leads, how many are in a formal sales conversation? Who is in the pipeline? So those are the 3 core metrics. The thing, and again, like attribution's really hard to track sometimes.
Yep.
You know, but the other thing that we would track is as we got a little bit more sophisticated over time is we would actually track who, like someone might enter into, oh, Spencer's asking for the 3 metrics. It's net new leads. It's, the thumbs up. We're really pumped on net new leads. Net new leads, it's leads already in the database that have reconverted or re-engaged, cold. And then third is a total projected pipeline, so revenue, like in conversation with a sales rep.
Got it.
And our conversion rates were pretty good. You know, I mean, like we would see about 33 to 36% of all people that were interested in learning more about our product end up in pipeline. So we had fairly healthy, I think like just for our industry, like the baseline conversion metric is 25%. So 1 out of every 4. So to be floating at 33 to 36% was a really good indicator that this was working.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There was
fascinating.
There was something else. The other point that I was going to make is as we got more mature, I think tracking attribution maybe it got more convoluted, but what we were really tracking was someone could attend a webinar, but then 5 days later fill out a demo form, or someone could attend a field event, meet us at a trade show booth, and then attend a webinar 1 week later and then end up in a sales conversation. So instead of just tracking like really high level baseline metrics, we were getting really nuanced on where in the customer journey were we actually touching, like where were we having a touch point on any given channel so that we could understand, like it takes someone to hear us speak at a conference, attend a webinar, and download an ebook before they're even going to consider having a sales conversation with us. And so we could get more insight on the power of the webinar channel based upon like where in the customer journey are they engaging on this channel, on the event channel specifically.
Interesting. Very cool.
So to pivot to where you were a few minutes ago, Chris, so now we're at 2 webinars a week. We brought on our first, it was basically a marketing specialist. It's kind of a generalist, our third marketing hire at that point in time. And she really just had an events focus. And she kind of took over running the webinar playbook so that I could kind of elevate and kind of get out of the weeds a little bit. Yeah. So we had one net new hire that was basically trained on the playbook we were running. And then she was empowered and held accountable to the metrics that I talked about. So based upon our past performance, we would actually goal her monthly, quarterly on, the performance of the channel based upon those metrics.
Got it.
Looks like, okay. Thanks, Spencer. Thanks for dropping that in there. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I know you're going to talk about this in a bit, but even in the early days of the webinar program, you mentioned that you would bring on key folks in the industry, influencers, to really talk, share their expertise. Ultimately, during this process, how much are they helping to drive registrations in some way, or invites, things like that?
Yeah, so as part of I would call it as part of the event content engine, we're also creating content for them to enable them to share, to be excited to share. It would really depend on the person. I mean, we had some events where I think our best healthcare webinar ever through the Build Better series that I mentioned, we basically got like the number one voice in the sector to jump on a webinar with us. And we got about 400 registrations on that webinar.
Got it.
And so, right. And so like a person of influence can have a lot of pull. But I would say that like I wasn't ever over reliant. I would say the best success in terms of driving registrations always came internally from our team. And I would maybe give 20% weight to a thought leader influencer to help drive additional net new names into our ecosystem.
So maybe it's less about the net new that they're helping to drive and just about the credibility of the content that they're helping to add. Would you say that's?
Yeah, I would say that's very accurate. And again, in some cases there are anomalies. I'm really excited to get into the flagship brand event because I'm jumping a little ahead of myself, but with our flagship brand event that we built, we actually we basically gave them a kind of presenting sponsorship. We paid them for it. They were a key partner in our sector. They actually ran a podcast that was the most listened to, downloaded podcast in our ICP. So they pulled huge weight in our sector.
You said they. Ooh, I'm sorry. Who's they?
It's a company called We Are For Good. They're actually hosting an event today. They're hosting their own virtual event today. So you can go to weareforgood.com and learn more about what those folks are doing. Okay. But we basically, like in our event, we gave them like the title presenting sponsorship. They were essentially like co-presenters of our conference with us. We gave them their own stage where they hosted their own conversations, pulled in their own speakers, brought in their own influence to add value to our event. And it was as simple as saying, hey, like they put ads for our event across all their channels on their podcast. And everything's tracked. So in that scenario, we had an incredible partnership where we were giving them a platform. They were pulling in influence and reach across the sector. And they probably drove, for a flagship brand event that was bringing in 4,000 to 5,000 registrations, they're pulling in a good 15%, which is not a small amount of people, but they were pulling in people of significant influence.
That's awesome.
So that play for us worked really, really well when it came to our flagship brand event.
So let's actually, before I know, let's. So the webinar program's grown really well. You've doubled the number of webinars. You have these 2 unique segments. At what point you say, okay, let's go to the next step, whatever that is? What was the driver of that?
Yeah, so I think part of this is a key challenge. I think like we were growing so quickly. I mean, at one point in time, we were growing more than 100% year over year. So you're
talking about company revenue. Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about
company revenue? Yeah. And so we're growing really quickly. So over the course of 4 years, I was the 25th hire at the company. By the time I exited, we're knocking on 200. So, it's still a small company per se, but in terms of the scope of where we were when I started and where we were when I left, significant change. And so as you had a sales team, for example, that is diversifying, is growing, right? We're actually broadening the amount of verticals and segments we're working in. I think one of the big roadblocks and challenges was it became a lot more difficult, and it took a lot more lifting, communication, alignment, just to help people feel like they were in lockstep with our webinar program. And so you introduce a bigger marquee once a year flagship event where we've started to build an audience. We've built a community of subscribers that have engaged. We've, doubled, tripled, quadrupled our customer base. And now we're at this place where I love how engaged Spencer is here in the chat. I'm going to read this in a second.
Real quick, before you go on, one of the things that I was meaning to ask you is you really involved the sales team. What specifically do you mean? What were they doing?
Yeah. So first of all, I think just in terms of a connection cadence, I met individually with our sales reps twice a month. So I was actually getting feedback from them. I was feeding them. It was very, very hands-on, just feeding them everything that was coming down the pike. They were actually helping me select speakers. Hey, we're going to do an event in this vertical. Like a vertical that we did very well in was animal welfare. So we're at all the animal welfare conferences and we're hosting webinars for that vertical. And our sales team is actually plucking the influencers and speakers because they're the ones day in and day out prospecting and building relationships with those people. So they were a feeder for our events. And then the other piece is, we were a HubSpot organization. So we used HubSpot. And so I was uploading snippets and sequences. So marketing was actually writing all of the sales enablement that the sales team could then move really quickly. We didn't want our sales team to have to overthink on how do I position this? How do I write this? How am I inviting people to drive registrations? Like, how do I start a sales conversation? Marketing was actually just writing all that enablement, getting it in HubSpot. And it was basically a playbook that the sales team could plug and play with. Cool. So if you had the HubSpot integration with your Gmail, you can open up Gmail and just pull in the appropriate snippet that we've written for you, and you're just running.
Awesome. All right. So let's fast forward to you're now thinking about this event. Is that where we're supposed to be in this in the flow here?
Yeah. So we launched a flagship brand event. It was called the Responsive Nonprofit Summit. Responsive was our category. It was positioned around our point of view in market as well as what our product did. Without, I don't want to burn too much time getting into the nuances of the product, but we built our own category. And so we built an event around the category. And so again, like just how when we were small and scrappy on webinars, our first iteration of the brand event was scrappy. I'm talking like our CEO is like, I think at one point, like we had a staff member on camera and it was in our offices. They're on Zoom giving like the keynote speech. And they were like, and meet our CEO. And he just walks on camera. Like it was very, very scrappy. But the initial intentions were, again, back to our ethos. How do we provide value, not marketing? And so we've built a bigger base. We're gaining traction in market. We're actually bleeding a lot of new customers from our biggest competitor. About 40% of all new logos came from one competitor. Right. So people are starting to turn their heads and say, oh, like these guys are onto something. Like what's happening? And so from an event standpoint, we decided like now is the time to make a bigger splash in market. And so it started by just doing it on Zoom. We would actually do it twice a year. So we would do it in the spring and we would do it in the fall. And I think the first iteration of the event, from a metric standpoint, dating myself a little, but pretty sure we had about 500 registrations and maybe 300,000 or 400,000 in pipeline. But to fast forward to what we grew the event to from start to, several years later, we grew the event to 4,000 to 5,000 registrations and, a click below and above in the last 2 years we did the event, around 2 million in pipeline.
Okay. So you basically, and it's going to kind of nuance it a bit, but you basically went from a webinar program to a glorified webinar to start. First like conference was a glorified webinar. Yeah.
I think where we decided like, hey, we're ready to really make a bigger investment in this. I think for context, one of the challenges in our ICP is affordability and time to attend conferences and events, right? And so we felt like we were in this unique position where we could actually put something on for free because the events are generating revenue. We can dedicate a healthy portion of our budget to the event because we already know that we're going to get the return on investment. And we can make something free and accessible to our entire sector. And so we were, and a lot of the complaints from our ICP were, oh, we'd love to attend these top 3 biggest gatherings, but my CEO won't let me attend. And so we just said, well, we'll come to you. We'll do it for free. And on year 3, we decided to really up the production quality.
Yeah.
So, So what we did was we had a cool office in downtown Phoenix, really big office. And basically what we did is we brought in an in-house production team and we built 4 stages in our office. And so we are having high value production streaming from 4 stages in our office. So there's 4 different tracks that you could attend as an attendee. And we can get into this a little bit in a minute, Chris, but the tracks were really content at different stages of the funnel. So depending on where you were in your journey with us, you could tune into different stages and they would have varying nuances of maturity based upon where you were in your customer journey.
Awesome.
So 4 stages, 4 tracks, kind of think about it as like 4 different kind of phases of the funnel. And we also started bringing, and this kind of goes into like speaker network activation. We would bring hand select speakers on site. Yeah, so there actually wasn't an in-person attendee experience. There was a virtual attendee experience. And there was actually an in-person speaker experience where we're actually building relationships with our high influence speakers by having kind of bespoke sidecar events after the day's sessions are done. And we've got 3 days of sessions. So now you're at dinner with all of these high profile speakers. You've got everyone sharing food around the table. And now you're creating this whole other experience that is actually a part of our revenue strategy. So I'd say like we made a huge leap from the glorified webinar conference to, hey, we're going to put some deep intention behind production quality to match the content quality. And how can we actually garner momentum by getting some of our speakers in the room together?
Yeah, I love that. It gives you really just a custom experience, almost private experience with them for a few days. That's got to really build relationships strong.
Build strong relationships, but I'd also say like it helped with registration, right? Like it helped our speakers feel like they were a part of something really unique and special. Right. So while the event's going on, you've got every speaker on their iPhone streaming from backstage being like, I'm in Phoenix, this event's amazing. Right. So we would actually drive 20% of all registrations the week of the event while the event was happening.
And the speakers themselves, they get to hang out with the other thought leaders, and that's got to be great for them. Thinking about their own experience is.
Yeah, I've seen other speakers like develop net new partnerships. We Are for Good, like their conference, some of their sponsors for their conference that's happening right now was a feeder from our event because of the in-person.
It's interesting because it also adds value to sponsors that might attend, because they're building deeper relationships with, more influential folks or key customers in the space or whatever. That's really cool.
Yeah, and this is also jumping ahead a little, but the third component that we launched was we've only done it 2 years. So this year was the second year that we've done it, but we launched a user conference. And the user conference is the only event that is truly like brand event that's in person. So it's very bespoke, seating for only 200 customers. And to be honest, like our partners and sponsors are chomping at the bit to be in the room. So there was an in-person sponsor component with our user summit, our customer-centric summit, where again, and we built an incredible partner ecosystem. That's a whole other conversation, but our sponsors and partners saw a lot of value being in that room.
That's awesome.
I think, and this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but like the value of engaging sponsors in our event strategy. If you looked at conversion rates across all of our channels, so sales, cold outreach, marketing sourced, partner sourced, if a partner made a referral, we would win the deal 48% of the time. It was our highest. It was our highest converting channel. So you've got partners that are getting a ton of value by referring net new customers to us, and the events team is meaningfully engaging partners to give them a bigger platform, help them bridge new connections, create sponsorship opportunities for them to, again, get in front of our audience in a more meaningful way. And again, it's sort of this flywheel that starts to build on itself. And events being a channel for that flywheel.
Very cool. All right, so where do you want to go from here? There's a lot of places you could go, but there's time.
Yeah, I just want to look at what Spencer wrote here. Spencer, really appreciate everything you're dropping in here. For in-person events, we use celebrity keynote speakers, Michael Phelps. They have greatly helped drive registration. That's amazing. For virtual events, we found industry leaders, C-Suite Anywhere, Post-Seed, or VP at Top Tech. Helps drive registration greatly. Totally agree. We found people go to a shorter experience for knowledge gaining, sharing, while in-person is much more for the experience. Yeah, those are great insights. I think, there was a post that Chris actually shared with me recently about one of our event content pros. Hey, Ian, if you could actually link that would be awesome. We nominated the leading event content professionals that all of you can follow and watch this year. So Ian's going to drop that in the chat, and we highly recommend this group of people as folks to just keep an eye on, connect with them on LinkedIn. It's a wonderful network. One of them made a post recently about how they only limit all of their speaking sessions to 8 to 15 minutes, kind of like really, really short, condensed TED Talk style. And it was all about like, how do you drive as much value as humanly possible and like staying within the boundaries of people's attention spans. So, I think something that I want to play with is I'd love to get her on a webinar, and instead of doing a 45-minute session, we're going to do an 8-minute session with her, and let's see how it goes. So I think that's just a great point, Spencer, around the value of like being really concentrated in what you want to present to your audience.
Yeah, it's pretty bold to think that people have 45 minutes, and we're obviously doing this, but 45 minutes to really listen to two talking heads. But at the same time, we can utilize and chop this up with digestible pieces of content where if they drop off after 10 minutes, they might get the additional key topics from after. So.
Yeah, and we appreciate that you're here. I'm happy, Chris. I think kind of a couple pathways is if there are areas where you want to double click on the brand
let's talk
event.
about the speaker network. Let's talk about some key things that you did. Obviously, we are really focused on the speaker CRM, and I think that adds a lot of value just based upon my experience being able to have all that information in one place. But you were doing that. I mean, you were one of the folks that almost gave me the idea early on to really build it into our tool. But I'd love to hear how you leveraged it back in the day.
Yeah, I'm actually the story I want to tell is actually a mistake that we made, which I think puts emphasis on the value of a speaker network. Our team was very, very connected to not just CS, right? Like marketing, very connected with our customers. Sales team, very connected with our customers. We would leverage different staff to make speaker asks. I think the one thing to note here is for our brand event, we were actually so intentional about curating the content that we did not have a call for papers. We did not invite people to speak. It was hand selected, very, very intentional. And so we hand selected a customer that we wanted to speak, asked her to speak on a very specific topic. She said yes. And we found out a week later that she had a conversation with her CS rep and said, I'm actually not comfortable talking about this topic because I'm actually struggling with this part of your product that integrates with the topic of the session. And so now CS is mad at marketing because we've made an inappropriate ask with someone that isn't totally happy with the product.
Yeah, totally.
So I think my key learning there was, I think that like activating your speaker network has to be in harmony with other teams, and we have to get out of silos. And I think like and to be honest, like we were operating our speaker network and invite lists out of Excel sheets. And so when you're operating out of an Excel sheet, it's just cutting off all visibility across the company, but it's also cutting visibility off from yourself into, what was a customer's last EBR score when they did their last business review. Like if they're not an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10, we shouldn't be asking them to speak. And just by simply having access to that data makes a huge difference in streamlining your speaker asks and then activating speakers appropriately. Because we never want to leave a speaker with a bad experience. We only want the experience to be elevated so they come back, they want to talk about the event, et cetera.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's hard when you have, event teams potentially siloed across like your tier 1 event team, your field marketing team, your community team, and then you have a content person within each product line if you're a multi-product company. And a lot of times you're not leveraging the sales CRM for everything. There's certain key data that needs to flow into that for sure, but it's hard to consolidate that information. But if you don't figure it out like you guys did, then you're definitely underutilizing those thought leaders, influencers, folks like that, and/or make mistakes.
Yeah, and I think a huge part of how does a brand event produce the ROI? Because again, like every time we were doing annual planning for budgets, and I'm sure everyone listening to this today or on demand like feels this pain. What's going to come up is we're going to look at the marketing budget and we're going to say, outside of headcount, the largest expense in our marketing budget is events. So the reaction is we need to optimize, we need to cut. Where aren't we getting the most value? So not just having access to data and visibility into the influence of a speaker network, in my mind, is connected to ROI. Because if a speaker has a great experience at your event, first and foremost, like they're driving net new people to you, which opens up net new sales opportunity. But beyond that, for us, like I said, like if you're a partner who's a speaker and you're more energized to make referrals because of your experience, that's helping. Marketing's not necessarily going to get credit for that. But in our mindset, like we didn't care. We just care about the big number, right? Like what's the big quarterly number? What's the annual number? And if marketing takes a hit, but another team is benefiting from what we're doing, that's a win. Like that's awesome. So a speaker could be making referrals as a partner. They could form a really beneficial partner agreement with our partner team. They could be a customer that's on their way to becoming an evangelist. Right? They could be a speaker where, hey, later in the year, we're going to be at a trade show in the field and we want to stand up a bespoke event where, white glove invite only, we're going to invite them back to speak and pull in a local network. Like there's actually so much that you can do from your speaker. And I think that the thing that I advocate for is the speaker's role in your marketing engine is just starting when your event ends. And so what does this, like we talk a lot about the customer journey, but what's the speaker journey? Like what is, like when your event ends for the next 12 months,
Yeah.
What are you doing with your speakers? How are you activating them, and how are you tracking it?
And so I know we're on time at time, so I'll end with this thought. It's interesting because based off of what I heard, you're not just asking speakers to do all this stuff across the year. You're also providing them a ton of value
Yes.
throughout the time. Whether it's coming to the event, networking with other influencers, opening up partnerships for them. There's a lot of value that you're adding to them in that speaker journey as well. I think that's really critical, as opposed to feeling like you're just using your speakers. So
yeah, some of them get business from us. The list kind of goes on, but it's totally a mutual exchange of value.
All right, well, let's end it there. We got 11 more great webinar topics to come. I think we'll keep diving into this. But Bryan, I really, really appreciate the time, man.
Appreciate you, Chris. Thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm just going to share my screen really quick. If anyone wants to hang around for one more minute, and
okay, cool.
just want to let you know a little bit about who we are. Here at Sessionboard, we believe that high quality speakers and content are the heartbeat of any event. And that's what inspired us to create Sessionboard. And if you're having the data visibility, if you feel like your event team is siloed, if your speaker network is siloed from the rest of your go-to-market team, we've built a tool that can help. And so we simplify the complex workflows and disjointed communications that exist around speaker and content management, and we'd love to help. So head on over to www.sessionboard.com to learn more, and you can get in touch with our team there. But also want to let you know, in the spirit of what we talked about today, we're coming back next week. So we are, I get the privilege and opportunity to try this again. And so next week we have Candace Cody from Community Boost. She has actually scaled a virtual event to 50,000 registrations over the last 2.5 years. And I'm so excited to dive into what she's going to talk about. Ian's going to plug that event in the comments chat here. But also, if you're interested in just staying up to date, you can't attend every week. We're going to be providing monthly recaps and key takeaways from all of our speakers. So if you want to subscribe to our weekly live sessions and just stay up to date on all the learnings, you can subscribe here at the link that Ian is dropping in the chat. And we'll keep you up to date month over month. And you can join the sessions where you feel like you lean in most. So thanks so much for joining today. We will be in touch. Have a great rest of your week. And thanks for all the great work that you do. Cheers.
Thanks, Bryan.